He's managed to defeat every obstacle he's ever come up against, with a combination of animal cunning, a mean right hook and the help of his iconic yet utterly corrupt lawyer, Richie Scott, Sion Weber. An enemy Phil is unable to defeat, though, is dementia, and no punch, criminal scheme or loophole in the law is going to help him. There's no winning here, just time and the inevitable, as Nigel Bates, Paul Bradley, enters his final days. After sharing a heartbreaking goodbye with his best friend, Phil has been unable to visit Nigel in the care home. With sister Sam Kim Metcalf, deeply concerned for Phil's mental health and with Nigel deteriorating fast due to his pneumonia, a conversation with Mark Fowler Jr. Stephen Aaron Sipple convinces him that the time is right to reach out to the third Mitchell sibling, Grant Ross Kemp, in a bid to allow him the opportunity to say goodbye to his dear friend and reunite the Mitchell trio. Why does Grant return? I think Grant is desperate to see his son. They've never had a relationship, and he may see this as the first step towards potentially building one, Ross said. He's also shocked to hear from him in general and probably feels that, if Mark has reached out after all this time, then whatever is happening must be significant enough, and important enough, for him to come back to Walford immediately. Grant's return, though, doesn't go too smoothly. Grant was expecting to arrive back in Albert Square as a returning hero, but instead he's met with quite the complete opposite reaction and is given quite a cold reception, Ross said. Armed with the knowledge that his nearest and dearest are deeply worried about Phil, Grant heads off to see Nigel, and is heartbroken to see just how unwell he's become. Initially, Grant is very angry with Phil because he believes Phil has been selfish and has abandoned Nigel by placing him in a care home, Ross said. Utterly enraged by Phil's lack of communication, the Mitchell reunion quickly goes to hell, as Phil first boots out Sam and Mark, before he and Grant get down to the nitty-gritty. The following day, Phil is trapped deeply in his emotions, convinced that neither Nigel, nor Julie Bates, Karen Henthorne, need him around. With Nigel rapidly deteriorating, Julie decides the kindest thing is to withdraw treatment, and Billy Mitchell, Perry Fenwick, urges Phil to go and see his best friend, but he's thrown out as Phil's grief spills over. When he tries again later with Mark by his side, they're panicked to realize Phil is missing. Luckily, Grant knows exactly where his brother will be, and despite Julie's pleas to be at Nigel's side as he enters his final hours, Grant dedicates to reuniting Phil and Nigel. Grant's intervention works, and after the typical Mitchell shouting and posturing, he manages to get through to Phil and convince him that Nigel needs him, now more than ever. As they race against time that's quickly running out, they make it to the care home and Phil is able to say an emotional goodbye to Nigel, who holds on until his best friend finally arrives before peacefully slipping away. In the aftermath, though, Phil is raw. Returning home to find the residents of Albert Square planning a celebration of Nigel's life, Julie basks in the kindness of their friends, but Phil's pain is unyielding, leaving Grant and Linda Carter, Kelly Bright, terrified that history is about to repeat itself. What does Ross think the audience will take from the story? What makes it so special and impactful is the performances, particularly by Paul, Karen, and Steve, and that the story has played out in real time. Paul did an amazing job showing the many different layers of how dementia affects a human being, and how it impacts the people around them, and I think that will really resonate with many people. Will the sheer amount of grief he's endured cause a mental health relapse for Phil? And who can bring him out of it if it does? In EastEnders, few characters have weathered as many storms as Phil Mitchell. He's the man everyone fears, the hardman of Albert Square, the one who always seems to survive no matter how dark things get. But this time even Phil looks like he's standing on the edge, and there may be no way to close in. Phil's carefully controlled world starts to unravel piece by piece. His family is fractured, his enemies are circling, and the weight of his own past is becoming impossible to ignore. For a man who built his reputation on power and fear, losing control is the one thing he cannot handle, and that is exactly what is happening. Recent events have pushed Phil to breaking point. His relationships with those closest to him have become more strained than ever. Trust, once broken, is almost impossible to repair in the Mitchell family, and Phil is learning that the hard way. His children no longer look at him with the same respect. Instead, there is anger, disappointment, and painful distance. The cracks are impossible to hide. At home, the silence is louder than any shouting match. Conversations turn into confrontations. Every word feels loaded. Phil, once the center of the Mitchell empire, now feels like an outsider in his own family. Watching everything he fought for slipping through his fingers is a punishment far worse than any enemy could deliver. But family drama is only part of the nightmare. Old mistakes have a habit of returning in Walford, and Phil's past is filled with enough ghosts to haunt several lifetimes. Secrets he thought were buried are beginning to resurface, threatening to destroy what little stability he has left. Enemies who once stayed quiet are now finding their voice, and the pressure is building from every direction. Even his closest allies are beginning to question him. For Phil, pride has always been both his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. Asking for help has never come naturally. Instead, he pushes harder, fights louder, and builds higher walls. But this time, those walls may be trapping him rather than protecting him. There are moments where the legendary tough exterior slips. A glance, a pause, the silence after a heated argument. Small signs that beneath the anger is a man who is exhausted. Phil is used to being feared, but now he is facing something far more terrifying: vulnerability. And Albert Square notices. People who once stepped aside when Phil entered a room are starting to see the cracks. Some feel sympathy. Others see opportunity. In Walford, weakness is dangerous, and Phil's enemies are more than ready to take advantage. The Mitchell name has always carried power, but power means little when the person holding it is falling apart. There is also the emotional toll of isolation. Phil has spent years pushing people away, convinced that strength means standing alone. Now, when he needs support the most, there are very few people left willing to stand beside him. Loneliness hits harder when it arrives after a lifetime of believing you didn't need anyone. This emotional spiral threatens to pull him somewhere darker. Fans know Phil's history. They've seen him battle addiction, grief, betrayal, and devastating personal loss. Each time he found a way to survive. But this chapter feels different. This isn't just another Mitchell family feud or business rivalry. This feels personal, internal, and far more dangerous. This is Phil versus himself. As tensions rise, viewers are left wondering whether this is the start of redemption or total destruction. Can Phil finally confront the damage he has caused and rebuild the relationships he has shattered? Or will his refusal to change cost him everything? There's also the fear that desperation could drive him toward reckless decisions. When Phil feels cornered, he doesn't retreat, he explodes. And in Albert Square, explosions rarely affect just one person. The fallout could spread across the square, dragging family, friends, and enemies into the chaos. The tragedy of Phil Mitchell is that beneath the reputation, the money, and the intimidation is a man who has always been searching for something simple: loyalty, love, and peace. Yet his own choices have often destroyed the very things he wanted most. Now, standing on the edge, he may be forced to face the truth that the biggest threat to his life has never been a rival gangster or a family enemy. It has been himself. As EastEnders builds toward what could be one of Phil's most emotional storylines yet, viewers are bracing for heartbreak. Whether he fights back or falls completely, one thing is certain. Phil Mitchell's world is collapsing, and the consequences will shake Walford to its core. For the man who always seemed untouchable, the most shocking twist of all may be this: Phil Mitchell is finally running out of ways to save himself. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to EastEnders Spoilers Official.